I guess my earliest memory as a child was when my mother used to take me to church as I grew up as a boy. We went to church at Bolivia, Baptist church out there, and on Sunday morning it was a standing order that everybody got up and got ready to go to church. My daddy owned an old T-model Ford at one time. We rode the T-model Ford to church. And I remember, the reason I remember that so well, back in that day and age in the church, we had a little organization they called a Sunbeam Band. My mother was the leader of the Sunbeam Band, and I remember that I was a Sunbeam. And from there we began to go up a little bit, had Sunday school and preaching and things of that nature. But that's about the earliest that I can remember growing up of anything that really sticks in my mind, you know what I mean? But that's always been in my mind. I was telling somebody the other day, I said, I used to be a sunbeam. I remember that much when I was growing up. That was about the first thing I ever remember being in church, you know. We always played. We didn't, my daddy didn't have no farming. He rented out the farm. And we boys, we didn't have nothing but time. We played all the time. We played marbles. I remember, real comical since I got thinking about, you remember ever seeing these old colored butter beans? Some was speckled, some was blue, and some was black. Well, we got a whole bunch of those things, and we separated them out, and we called them cows. And we'd put them in pens, and we'd play with those things for a day at a time, you know. So we had a falling out over a cow and got in a scrap. My mother would wear us out and run us from the house. But we played that, and we played baseball. We had a big baseball team. Jim and myself. No, Lynn and Jim was one team, and me and Alton was the other team. I was the oldest, and Alton was the youngest. And we played baseball. Got along pretty good playing baseball, but once in a while we'd have a scrap, and that would end up the baseball game. And I remember one time that we had a little ruckus, and I believe it was Lynn cracked me on the head with a stick, brought a little blood, and my mama wore him out. But we had plenty of time to play. We played all kind of games, played marbles and games we made up, and didn't have no toys to play with much. We played with automobile tires and all kind of little old things we'd make up out of tin pan lids, just something to roll on a stick, you know, just something to play with, to entertain ourselves. Then we played basketball. We had a hoop on the back of the smokehouse about big around, come off a cartwheel. We had an old sponge ball, that was a basketball. And we get back there and play basketball. That was a two-team basketball team. I'll tell you, we had a time back there with that too. And we built an asphalt plant one time. We bricked up an asphalt plant out of brick, got us a gallon can, put in there, and made a whistle out of a cane reed we got and put in that place where the stopper went. We filled that up with water, and we had an iron pot in front of it. We'd get this old asphalt that they dug up off the road, and we'd put it in that iron pot, and we'd build a fire under that thing. And when the asphalt was melting, the water in the can would get hot, and when the steam started coming out, it'd blow that whistle on that thing, you know. And we'd take that old asphalt, and we'd get out there and smear it down on the road, paving highways and just stuff like that. We always had something to entertain us. Well, nothing special, but I mean, it was always special. We went to church every Sunday, you might say, and I had a lot of friends in church, and I had a good Sunday school teacher. I remember her real well. Matter of fact, she hadn't been dead but about 2 or 3 years, or maybe 4 years. And I remember when I was baptized I was baptized in Royal Oak Swamp over here on 17 Highway. They were right down below the bridge there. That's where they baptized me. And we had a preacher that preached for us, and he'd start preaching at 11 o'clock. We always laughed about it. He preached till a Greyhound bus come by, and he's knocked off, and that was at 1 o'clock. So he was a long-winded preacher. That was mostly what we did, just a regular routine of going to church and Sunday school and the GAs and the RAs and the Sunbeams and things like that. Well, when I was 6 years old, my brother Lynn, he was a year and a half younger than I was, and I was old enough to go to school, and back then you had to walk to school. From up there where A.W. lived, you had to walk from there to Bolivia to go to school. That was about 3.5 miles. I didn't have nobody to go with me, so my granddaddy and my grandmama took me over there and kept me through the school period so I could go to school with their children. So Moody and Roy and Gracie and Maxie and Junius and myself, we all went to school. We walked through from where my granddaddy's old house is. We walked through the woods over there across Clark's Branch and come out over the schoolhouse at jail about where the Mount Olive Baptist Church is now. And that's where we went to school and had all the grades in one big school building, one big room, and all the grades was in there. Miss Murdy Gallo was my school teacher. And Aunt Anna, she went to school out there. And Edith, and all of her brothers and sisters. A lot of the Galloways, a lot of those people are dead and gone now. But we had a good teacher, and we went to school and enjoyed it. And after I went there 1 year, Lynn got old enough that he could go to school, so I went back home then, and he and I walked from up there where A.W. lives, like I said, to Bolivia School every day to go to school until the schools was consolidated. That's when then they started getting the buses, and it was a little bit better going to school then. But we made it somehow. I don't know exactly how, but we did. We used to have we boys always had a good Christmas. We didn't have no bought Christmas trees. We didn't have no electric lights to put on the Christmas trees, but we'd get with my mother, and we'd get us a little tree of some kind, and we'd put it in the living room and fix it up, and we'd cut these little different colored papers, make these little bead-looking things, and hang them on the Christmas tree, and put candles on there, melt the candle, and stick it on the limb, and light the candles, and put some tinsel and stuff like that on it. And that was our Christmas tree. And my daddy always bought us some kind of a little old hopping bird or a little old car. Back then you didn't have no battery-operated toys. They was all spring-operated. We'd get a little old racer or something like that, and we wind that thing up and turn it loose across the floor. I remember my daddy giving me a little old robin one time. You'd wind him up, that rascal would hop across the floor. I thought that was the greatest thing I'd ever seen in my life. And sometimes we'd get a red wagon or something like that. We always got some toys, and very limited, but as far as we was concerned, it was the best, and get an orange and an apple or two, a few raisins and stuff like that. Now, that was about the extent of our Christmas, other than our festivities of eating, Christmas dinner, and friends coming by. My mother always cooked. I remember she always cooked a great big fruit cake about that big around in a big old pan she had, and it must have been that thick. She'd cook that along about Thanksgiving, seems to me like. Put it under the bed wrapped up real good, and she let that stay there. But about time for Christmas, she pulled it out and for Christmas and cut it so we'd all have cake for Christmas. And I think that's the best fruit cake I ever eat. I've never eaten any since then. It was that good to me anyway. But we had a good Christmas always. We had a few clothes, got some new clothes. I remember when I got my first suit of clothes. I was working for my granddaddy then. And he was paying me 25 cents a day to hand tobacco down at the tobacco barn. I think they got me they ordered me a suit of clothes from Sears and Roebuck. And Lynn, he got a pair. And we didn't like the suits when they come, because back then they had them old knicker breeches. You remember them things, the old high socks? We wanted long pants. But we didn't like those things, but we had to wear them to church every Sunday. We finally got money enough, we got us a pair of long pants, and we was all right after that. We had a radio, and our neighbor up there, Johnny Arnold, he had a radio. An old Sears and Roebuck Silvertones. We went there and listened to his a long time, and we got to the place that we decided my daddy wanted a radio. We didn't listen to it in the weekdays, but on Saturday night, everybody from all over the country come to our house or either to his house, And you know, naturally, everybody listened to the Grand Ole Opry. And that was from about 8 o'clock, about 9 o'clock till 12 or 1 o'clock our time. And everybody sat there and listened to that thing just like they didn't want to miss one note of any music, note or song, you know. And that was a routine every weekend. And if it come up a thundercloud back then, if it was 100 miles away and light and you had static on those old radios, you know, and if it was bad and we couldn't hear it, we was all disappointed and put out and out of shape because we couldn't listen to the Grand Ole Opry. But we listened to that on Saturday night, and that was the biggest entertainment we had, because radios wouldn't play in the daytime. You couldn't pick up a thing on a radio in the daytime back then, you know. They were just nighttime jobs. So that was our entertainment. During the rest of the time, we just sat around the house there and sat around the fire till it was bedtime. And sometimes my mother would read to us and things of that nature. But we had a great time together, us four wee boys. We always had something to do or something to entertain us with. Well, the Grand Ole Opry we got come from WSM Nashville, Tennessee.
Okay.
That was on.
That was the first one, I think.
Yeah, that was WSM Nashville, Tennessee. I remember what the WSM stood for. The man said it was an insurance outfit. He said, WSM, we sheave millions. Talking about customers, you know. But that was on every Saturday night. And they still have it, but it's all the old people that was on there. It was really musicians, entertainment. That's gone. We got these pop artists and this rock and roll mess. It's nothing like it used to be. I don't even pretend to even try to listen to it because there's nobody on there. One or two of the older ones, and they've kind of had to swing along with the rest of the group to stay on the air, you know, and put out records. So the Grand Ole Opry, as far as we're concerned, the way we knew it, is a thing of the past. Well, we didn't have no transportation. We could walk to the house and date at the house. I don't know nothing else to do. We didn't have no car to go anywhere or go no movies or anything like that. Once in a long time, after my daddy got a car and I grew up big enough to drive a car, he'd let me have his car to ride out to my girlfriends, and we'd go out. But we had to be in about 11 o'clock, you know. We'd try to go to a movie or something and just get out and get away from the house at least, you know. But that was the extent of our date, and we had to walk. If I had a girlfriend out there, believe me, I had to walk out there to see her, and then after the date was over, I had to walk back home at night, and I was always scared at night to walk by myself on the road, but I did it anyway, you know. And we didn't have too many conveniences for dating back in that day and age. Back when I was growing up, really we didn't have any bear then when we was young, when I was real young. But when I got up grown, and when Moody got grown, we began to have problems with bears killing the farmer's sheep. They'd go in and kill a sheep, like if they killed one tonight, eat part of that sheep, they wouldn't go back and eat that same one. They'd go back next night and kill another one. They wanted fresh meat, evidently, all the time. And I remember the first bear they ever killed, Moody and all those Holden boys, Homer and John and Uncle Lindsay and Hubbard Coleman, Frank, I reckon, the other, a host of them. Anyway, they went up there one day and jumped a bear and where he'd killed one of those sheep up there, and they run him out, and somebody killed him. Uncle Lindsay said he never heard of any gun shooting in his life. He said they must have all been scared to death or something. He said, sounded like a Revolutionary War had started up there. He said some of them, I believe, shot bark off of them trees 10 foot up in the air. They was just shooting. But they killed a bear. I seen him. He was a great big bear. He weighed about 150 pounds. Matter of fact, they dressed him, cut him up, and a lot of people got some bear steak. I got some of it and cooked and ate. It was all right. And Lindsay, he always kept some bear meat, you know. They killed bear meat. He'd get him some of those steaks and put them in the freezer and cook them. It was good meat, just a little bit red like horse meat. You know, back in wartime, people eat a lot of horse meat and didn't know what they was eating. They thought they was eating a cow or bull steak, you know, and there's a lot of horses eat back that day and age. But we had some bears, and they'd tear down beehives to get the honey and destroy the bee by it. Just tear them down. Those bees didn't back the bear off. He'd go there and tear that hive all to pieces and get the honey out of it. Now, I think people have bears now. I don't know much about it. I mean, have honey. I don't know much about it, but I've heard people say recently that they've had some trouble with bears tearing up their beehives and stuff like that, but I don't have no close connections anybody has. And I don't know how recently that's been. Well, back when I lived with my granddaddy, me and Lynn and Jim, Alton, he was too little to work on the farm. Him and Virginia played. The rest of us worked with my granddaddy on the farm trying to help him raise his crop. And in the fall of the year, when we got everything gathered up, he'd take the old mules and hook them to one of the old big wagon and load it up with hay and fodder and pears and watermelons and stuff that we was going to eat. And we'd go down here to, you know where Brown's Landing is down there? Where you go down the road right up to the inlet there? And all them old big oak trees sitting over to the side? Well, we camped under those trees for a whole week, and then there was no inland waterway there. It was just river and oyster rocks and everything. No inland waterway. Nothing had been upset. And you could go out there on those oyster rocks and pick up oysters any time of the year you want to. Now the difference is now you got a closed season and an open season. You can't get no oysters now. It'll be September or October, I think it. Excuse me. Before you can go there and pick up any oysters, then it goes through March, and it's closed again. I believe that's the way it is. That's what I say. I can't remember too good. But we'd stay down there for a week, and we'd catch oysters. You could take a cast net and go down and catch all the shrimp you wanted. Go down and go progging to the far. You heard people progging? Go down that river there. I've seen my daddy and Uncle Newman in there progging to get flounders. When all of us would go down, we'd go down there to what they called Neeser's Landing on the 4th of July, and they'd catch the fish and the shrimp when we got down there to eat. Now you can't do that. There's not that many fish or shrimp in that river. But we'd stay down there a week, and on about Friday, we'd get everything together and take those old mules and go back up the country, back home. But you can't get oysters hardly when the season's open. They're so scarce, very scarce. Now clam, you can get some clams. There's quite a few clams down there. Fish are scarce. If you get any fish, most of the time you have to buy them off of boats that's been outside shrimping and catch you some. Or in the fall, like September and October, you can go around Bullhead and sometimes down here, but not often, and catch a lot of spots when the spots are running. That's when most people get their fish down here. But you got to have a license now to put out a net. Back then you could put out a net anytime you wanted to, go oystering anytime you wanted to, Saturday or Sunday or any time. Go right out on the bank there and build up a fire and sit down there and roast them. Now you got to have a net to get put out. You can't have over 100-yard net. You got to have a net put out crab pots to catch crabs. You got to have a net to catch shrimp. And you got to pay for all those things. And now they're fixing to make it official, I think, that about next year, I believe it's next year, I'm not positive, that everybody from 18 to 62's got to buy a fishing license to fish in that salt water down there. So I said, maybe that's one thing I'm going to escape. I'm above 65 or 62. But it's altogether a different ball game now than what it used to be. Back then there was no restrictions. You did what you wanted to and asked no questions. Now you got to be careful doing the best you can that some guy don't come along and catch you for something, you know. So that's the difference in then and now. People have fished it to death and oystered it to death, and a lot of the oyster beds has been tore up by the clammers digging clams. You upset the oysters, and the oyster seed and everything that the oysters grow. You destroying your oysters, and then they complained about they haven't got any oysters. And the ones that's complaining is the one that dug up the oyster rocks mostly. But it's nothing like it used to be, and they're very scarce. You used to go down there and pick up 4 and 5 bushels on one tide. And you go down there now, I mean a man that can really oyster, and you do good to pick up a bushel of oysters on a whole tide. That's how scarce they are, because I oyster down there every year, me and a friend of mine. Most of the time we wind up on a tide about maybe a bushel, at the very best, a bushel and a half apiece or something like that. And that's how scarce they've got. And you don't, like it is now, you don't go down that river and catch any fish. Maybe when it gets cooler, temperature drops down, you might catch a few fish, but there's not very many down there, very scarce. Well, when I went there to live with them, stayed that 1 year and went to school. After I grew up and got a little bit bigger, I went over there and helped him farm about every summer. We worked with him over there. He was a good man. He took care of his family. And he seen it. We had something to eat. I told somebody the other day, my granddaddy raised us on rice and tomatoes. I said, you could be sure you got rice and tomatoes about every meal over there. But his wife, my grandmother, she was a hard-working woman. She cooked and kept those 11 head of children clothed and fed. You know, he had a big family. They was a big family. And they all worked on the farm. They was all smart. We all worked on the farm because back then everything was manual. You didn't have no tractors to plow ground. You plowed with a mule and a plow. And it'd take you all day long, hard work to plow an acre of land. Now you can take a tractor and go out there and plow up everything you got in 1 day's time. But those discs, you know how wide they are. And all the poisoning and the suckering and all that stuff was done manually. My granddaddy was strict. He wanted you to walk straight, behave yourself, and be kind of a fellow you're supposed to be. And if you wasn't, he didn't hesitate to call your hand on it. I was thinking about yesterday or today. We used to gather up there in the house after we got through with supper at night, and all of us were sitting in there in the wintertime around the fire. My granddaddy had an old rocking chair, something like that, and he sat right over in the corner by the fireplace, and at night he always read some kind of a paper. I don't know what he was reading. I reckon it was a charity and children. We boys get in around the fireplace, and we didn't pay no attention. We'd get pretty loud and pretty mouthy and having a big time. All of a sudden you hear that paper go, rip. He didn't say a word. He just seemed to look down over his glasses like that at us. It's just like you turned the switch off. He put the paper back up and go to reading. You didn't hear no more noise that night, but he was good to us. He just believed in, I reckon, behaving yourself and not disturbing the peace or something, or him especially. And he worked all during the week, and on Saturday at 12 o'clock he'd come in and clean up, take the old mule and buggy and come down all down through here and all these churches through here and preach. And like I said a while ago before we got hooked up here, that about 12 o'clock on Sunday night he'd get back home. Sometimes he might bring back a couple of dozen eggs, something like that. But he won't preach it for the money. If he got any money, I don't know it. If he did, I hope he did. But preachers back in that day and age, they didn't get no salary. They didn't get much money. Sometimes, they, like I say, they might bring back some vegetables or eggs or sometimes chickens. But so far as the money, if they'd have preached for the money, they would have never preached because people didn't have no money much back that day and age. My granddaddy was the first pastor they ever had at this church down here, Sabbath Home Church. He's the one that started that church and was their first pastor. And I don't know exactly what year he started that church. But anyway, I mean when the church was built. But anyway, they called him and he was the first pastor. And he stayed there and worked with them, helped them get it constituted, organized and everything, and got them in the Brunswick County Baptist Association. And he stayed with them a while, and then he went on and... No, I believe while he was there, he got sick. Well, anyway, whatever happened, I think he got sick. But anyway, after my granddaddy got sick and died, Lindsay went down and preached in that church a while. He was pastor of that church. And then later on, he left, and from then, I don't know all who took. They've been dozens of preachers down there since then. But my granddaddy's the one that got the church started for them. They called him. He was their first pastor. And him and Preacher Isom Stone, that was Aunt Anna's daddy. They was buddy preachers, and they'd hold revivals around over the county in different places, and people sick, they did the visiting and praying for them and stuff like that. And everybody back that day and age was good neighbors. If you had sickness in your home, the community got together and come to see what they could do for you. The wife was sick, the ladies did the cooking. If the man had crops together, the men went out and helped him gather the crops or shingles put on a house or whatever had to be done. They got together and took care of each other. You know, you don't do that anymore. But people back then loved each other and was concerned about people's welfare, and there's a lot of difference in that then and what goes on nowadays. But my daddy was my granddaddy was a well-respected man, and he was good to his family, and he preached and done everything he could to help promote the spiritual welfare of the church and the families he had an association with, and anytime they called on him day or night, he was there to assist. I had a high respect for him, and I remember the day that they come down and took him out in the back room there where he was sick and took him to the hospital at Southport. He had pneumonia, I think, is what he had. Took him down there. They done everything they could for him, but I went by to see him one time when I was a little fellow, but I remember seeing him. He's sitting there in the bed. But back then they didn't have much to treat a fellow with for stuff like that. He didn't ever get any better. He just stayed there till he finally died from that pneumonia. And I couldn't tell you much more about him than that, because that was about all I can remember of. I remember, like I say, working with him on the farm and how good he was to us and to his family and all those things that he looked out for. He was just a good man all the way around so far as I'm concerned. And his wife, like I say, she supported him and took care of the children and worked hard. You know, it was a job to make clothes for a family that size, and you had to make most of the clothes. Did all the cooking and all that. That was a big job. Of course, those girls helped after they got up some size. But it all worked out good. He raised every one of them, and they got up and got grown and married and went on and had their families. Some of them died at a young age, and some of them lived to be pretty old. You take Bernice. Bernice was old. Your daddy was about 75 or 76, wasn't he?
No, he was 85.
85. Yeah, I reckon so, because he was older than I am. He was older than I was. I was born in 1917, and I went to stay with my granddaddy when I was 6 years old, and he was living there in that house because we boys all slept upstairs. The house was had 3 bedrooms in it and a living room, and then you had the kitchen and the cook and the dining room was separate. That's the way they built those houses. There was a porch between them. And on the side of the porch where you went down, it had a pump and a shelf there. And that's where you had your basins and everything. You washed your face and your hands before you went to the kitchen to eat, you know. And they done all the cooking and cooking. And upstairs, there was 2 bedrooms up there. The boys stayed on one side and the girls stayed on the other side. And I remember that old house had the old shingles on it, and sometimes you look right through the top of the thing. Took every quilt you could get in the house, put on you in wintertime, keep from freezing to death. None of the houses had insulation then, you know, just old clapboard houses. But it was a good house. You know, everybody back then built houses like that. Old man lived over there next to my granddaddy, Mr. Ben Adkisson. He had one just like my daddy, just like my granddaddy. Mr. Henry Galloway lives down there. He's still down there. He built one just like my granddaddy generally about. Anywhere you look, you see those houses around over the Brunswick County. That was their style for building houses back that day and age. Of course, you don't see any now built like that, except the old ones still standing. Some people, you know, kind of renovated them and redone them just for more or less for keepsakes, I reckon, or something like that. Granddaddy had in that old house, it's still there, I reckon, had a big fireplace in that thing. Had to cut wood for that. And had we call them back irons in there. It's keep from burning the brick out the back of the chimney. Some of them was old big rocks, like you said. Some people had a old piece of thick steel back there, call them back irons, to keep the heat from burning the brick out, because it didn't have no. Most of them was just built with plain brick. They didn't have fire brick then that I know anything about. And those plain brick will eventually burn out from heating and cooling, you know. Aunt Edna, I know you don't remember her. She, like I say, she married Uncle Newman. They raised 2 boys. They had Hinton and Foy. No, 3 boys, and Otis. Boy, he died some years back with a heart attack. He lives, you know where Helen lives back over there in the woods, don't you?
Mm.
Well, he lives right across back over there in those woods where the old home place used to be, where his granddaddy used to be. Aunt Edna died. She's buried out here in this cemetery there at Sabbath Home Church. Aunt Gola, she married my daddy's brother, Uncle Jewel, and that makes me and Vincent double first cousins because brothers married sisters, you see. Aunt Gola, she's been dead a long time. I don't have no idea how long she's been dead. Matter of fact, I don't even believe I was living here then because I left here and was gone about 20 years before I come back. But, and I don't believe I was here when Gracie died. I can't remember it if I was. But I knew all of them, every one of them. Uncle Jewel and Aunt Gola lived about, at hollering distance of each other there, you know. I was in the Merchant Marines. I went in the Merchant Marines and stayed in there till Korean War was over, and I come out then, never did go back. I went back to my old line of work. I was in construction work. I was a welder, welded in the shipyard during shipyard times, and come out and went into the Merchant Marines. I went into the Merchant Marines in 45. Because the reason I wasn't in World War II was because I was working in a defense job and they didn't draft me, and I didn't volunteer. So I stayed in there then, and like I said, until the war was over in Korea, and I come out after that and went back in construction, and I stayed there till I retired in '83.